Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, joining you today. A happy New Year. First broadcast in a while. We took a week and a half off, and it's been just a ton of stuff going on. And I have to tell you, 2024 is going to shape up to be perhaps the most consequential year in American history, because we have got so many battles over the soul of America going on. I hope you'll stay with us. I hope you'll subscribe and share these publications, our publications and these videos with your friends, because that's how they're going to get it. We can't depend upon the YouTubes or the Facebooks to automatically share it. It has to come organically from you in order for that to occur. So share. Let's talk about our subject today. And our subject's very, basically cuts to the heart of our entire ability to determine who's going to represent us. And that is the Colorado and Maine, the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State have determined that Republicans should not be able to vote for Donald Trump in primary ballots. And what's more, Donald Trump, Mainers and Coloradans should not be able to vote for Donald Trump in a general election. Colorado's been pretty blue lately. So, whether or not Donald Trump could win Colorado is problematic. But the fact of the matter is, in Maine, Donald Trump won one electoral college vote in Maine in 2020. And so you look at that state and you say, listen, this has a real electoral college impact. And so it matters what happens. And so what's going on? Well, the states in both Colorado and in Maine, our Republican Party are filing lawsuits. Donald Trump's campaign has filed a lawsuit trying to go to the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, to overturn these decisions. And we're going to face a legal battle, and we'll keep you apprised of that. But the bottom line is, this is an outrageous abuse of power by both the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State for a simple reason. And the simple reason is that the U.S. Constitution demands that that localities are not deciding who gets to be on the presidential ballot or not. There are criteria, and for the Secretary of State in Maine to determine, oh well, in my view, the criteria has been met to reject Donald Trump off the ballot, is in fact an overreach of that Secretary of State's authority and is dangerous for the future. Because let me tell you, a Secretary of State in any number of Republican states could say, we're not going to allow Joe Biden on the ballot because Joe Biden has been proven in Congress and proven by records to be nothing more than a shill for the Chinese government. And as a result, we're not going to let somebody who is effectively who is not representing American interests and there's reason to believe he's in control and in the thrall of the Chinese government due to Hunter Biden's relationships. We cannot allow that person to be on the ballot. They are ineligible. That's the same kind of logic, and it doesn't fly. But let's take a look and just see what happened and how the different candidates reacted, because I think it's really instructive about how candidates reacted to this particular attempt. And I'm going to go back to the Colorado, the Colorado decision, because ultimately, I think the Colorado decision tells you a lot more about it. So let's start with this particular analysis that came out of Colorado. And I want you to take a look at how the right way to respond to this. And here's the
former President Trump also speaking out on the ruling. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Chris Christie all said the court should not be making this decision, that it should be up to the voters. And Vivek Ramaswamy calling on the Republican candidates to show solidarity against the ruling.
I will withdraw. I pledge to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary ballot unless and until Trump's name is restored. And I demand that Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie and Nikki Haley do the same thing, or else these Republicans are simply complicit in this unconstitutional attack on the way we conduct our constitutional republic.
Independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy.
There you go. Now, Robert F. Kennedy also weighed in, so this is a interesting perspective.
Kennedy Jr. said the American people are deprived of their right to choose and called for the decision to be swiftly reversed.
Who would have guessed?
The Biden
Who
White
would have
House
guessed that
has not commented on the
two statements? One, Vivek Ramaswamy, who says, "I'm not going to participate in a ballot that doesn't include Donald Trump." Now, obviously, Ramaswamy benefits from a ballot that doesn't include Donald Trump because he's the number 2 choice for a lot of Trump supporters. And yet he's saying, I won't be a beneficiary of this kind of chicanery to try to delegitimize the president of the United States, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, and rejects it out of hand and says, I'm not playing. Unfortunately, that's not what Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley said. They have not come out and said, we will not participate in a primary that does not include Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis came out and talked about how he was upset. And you can tell the Hill article I'm focusing on here is written by somebody who's no fan of Ron DeSantis, obviously, saying he railed against the Colorado Supreme Court disqualification, calling it a stunt by Democrats in the media to solidify support for Trump in the GOP primary. What the left and the media and the Democrats are doing, they're doing all this stuff to basically solidify support in the primary for him, get him into the general, and the whole general election is going to be all this legal stuff. Well, you know what? That is I'm sorry, but when Mr. DeSantis chooses to not say, I'm going to stand up to this by telling them that a primary election without Donald Trump is not a primary election at all, and I'm not participating, as Ramaswamy did. He's effectively saying, gee, I'm going to be, this is unfair because you're trying to push voters to Trump, but I'm going to stay on the primary ballot in the event that, I can pick up some convention votes out of Colorado, out of Maine. This is the wrong response. And it's scary because the fact is, you cannot expect somebody to stand up and say, we have watched a systematic legal attack from our Justice Department against Donald Trump. We've seen a systematic legal attack from interest groups and from state attorney generals and secretary of states against Donald Trump. You can't stand up against that systematic use of lawfare and the abuse of power by public officials to undermine our entire electoral system. You can't stand up to that when you're elected if you benefited from it when you were running. And DeSantis missed a huge opportunity. He's an attorney. He understands this. The right response, Ron, is I will refuse to benefit from legal chicanery designed to take Donald Trump off the ballot. Now, Nikki Haley has a slightly better response, and that she said, this was in Iowa in response to the Colorado decision, that I will tell you that I don't think Donald Trump needs to be president. I think I need to be president. I think that's good for the country. Okay, so she's, supports. So Nikki Haley strongly supports Nikki Haley. There's a shocker. But I will beat him fair and square. We don't need to have judges making decisions. We need voters to make these decisions. And so at the very least, she's saying we need voters to make these decisions. But once again, she's not saying I'm not going to countenance benefiting from illegal, unconstitutional legal actions by the left to throw the election to somebody else. Not going to participate. And truth be told, I'd have a whole lot more respect for DeSantis and Haley if they said very clearly what Ramaswamy said, is we are going to stand united against this unconstitutional assault on our electoral right to choose who's going to be our president of the United States. That's the right response. That is the right response. Any complaining while then saying, oh yeah, but I'm still going to benefit from it, is not the right response. In fact, it couldn't be more wrong. in Maine, where the Secretary of State just decided that Donald Trump won't be on the ballot, in Maine, I think you got a really interesting perspective. And that is because the Maine Secretary of State, who is a Democrat, decided and wrote a 34-page memo saying, "Oh, Donald Trump's guilty of insurrection based on her finding, no legal finding there, but her finding." And so what's the response? First of all, one of the state representatives in Maine is saying, "I'm going to impeach the Secretary of State. I want to impeach the Secretary of State because she's barring an American citizen and 45th president of the United States who's convicted of no crime or impeachment their right to appear on a Maine Republican primary ballot." Okay, so take legislative action in the states to try to create a political, if you have a political action by a politically elected official to try to skew the election and put the thumb on the scale on the election results for the 2024 election, let's hold them accountable. Great answer. Mike Sobolewski, who's running for Congress in the 2nd District, which is a winnable seat, is circulating a petition in support of impeachment of the Secretary of State. Once again, fighting fire with fire. Mr. Don Stanhope, these guys introduced at the beginning of the article, Tom Stanhope. I know another guy named Don Stanhope from a long time ago. Tom Stanhope, the Cumberland Town Secretary for Cumberland County Republican Committee, said he believes the ruling treads on the fundamental rights of America. Now imagine if this had been something that Ron DeSantis had said or Nikki Haley had said. This is the town secretary of the Cumberland County Republican Committee. Doesn't have millions of dollars of help to tell him what to say. But he said he gets it exactly right. It's very disturbing. It makes you question where our government is heading. Blah, blah, blah. I am mindful. Oh, hold on. You go down here and you get to the very bottom, and you find out. You get to the very bottom, and you discover. And here you have a state senator who appeared with. Actually, hold on. That's Plummer. Let's go all the way down because let's look at what the East Baldwin Town Chair for Cumberland County Republican Committee. Apparently, they only had access to Cumberland County, and I don't know Maine, so maybe where the Portland is in Cumberland County. But nonetheless, Ben McKinney, East Baldwin Town Chair for the Cumberland County Republican Committee, say he thinks the Ballot decision was a political one made to advance her career. I feel like there's a bigger agenda for her. I think this was her way of making her mark in the political arena. But his most pressing concern is that Bella's ruling could be setting a dangerous precedent of political figures trying to knock candidates off the ballot rather than putting the question of whom to elect to voters. He said if that precedent became precedent, he would be very worried about the state of democracy. People live in America because we have democracy, said McKinney. If you don't like a candidate, don't vote for them. How the heck did that quote not come out of DeSantis or Nikki Haley's mouth? How did that not come out of DeSantis or Nikki Haley's mouth? Because it's exactly true. This is a fundamental threat to the union, okay? To the union. Because if red states can kick Democrats off the ballot and blue states can kick Republican candidates off the ballot and say, well, at which point we don't have a national election. You're disenfranchising people from being able to vote for the selected candidates of the parties. If people don't like the selected candidates of the party, start a third party. I mean, most Americans are not a Republican or a Democrat at this point, or at least half of Americans are not a Republican or Democrat at this point. And so start a third party, create another candidate. That's fine, certainly within the bounds of the rules. But if you don't, but for one party to use the law as a means to disqualify the other party's choices and to effectively attempt to pick the other party's candidate for them is disenfranchising those who don't agree with you politically. It is wrong. America, we are fundamentally dependent upon a singular concept that our government exists at the whim of the consent of the governed, is the only legitimacy of the federal government, is that it is based upon the consent of the governed. If you deny people the ability to give that consent by denying them their choices, denying them the ability to choose who they want as their nominees, who they want on the ballot. If you deny them that, you have effectively undermined the very basis, the very just rationale, the very whole reason for existence of the government itself. That's how dangerous this is. America's divided. The last thing, let's have a fight in 2024. Let's have a fight in 2024 about the soul of America and where we're going to be. Let's have a fair fight in America about that. And if we have a fair fight, win or lose, neither side can complain because it is the consent of the governed. But at the very beginning of this process, if what we see is the Biden administration prosecuting Donald Trump for purposes that are political, where the special counsel goes to the Supreme Court and tries to demand that the state get a speedy trial, which isn't, by the way, the state has no right to a speedy trial, only the defendant has a right to a speedy trial. But the state get a speedy trial because, after all, we've got this election going on, and we want to make certain that we get a conviction before the election, which was his whole entire argument in terms of the Supreme Court wanting to expedite the case, the case he's got in D.C. Because he doesn't have a case. So he wants to expedite it because in D.C. you can convict a ham sandwich. That's why he wants to expedite that case. He wants to convict Donald Trump of something prior to December, prior to the election. So when you have that going on, and now Democrat secretaries of state, Democrat Supreme Courts saying, well, we're going to boot Donald Trump off the ballot. Folks, these folks keep talking about democracy, but the thing they're scared most of is your vote. Share this with everybody you know, because people have to understand that the one thing people who want to continue on the current path our country is on are most afraid of is your ability to vote them out of office. And this is going to be the story of 2024. And that's why we started with this as our first video for this new year. Let's take a look at some of the comments. We have a couple here. I'm going to just run them up and bring them over here so I can see them. And so if you want to comment, go ahead and comment in the section and I'll get to you. Here we go. What the Democrats are doing is against the Constitution. Yes, it is. It's decidedly against the Constitution. There can be no doubt that it is against the Constitution. That's what they are doing. It is, in fact, their intent, and they make no bones about it. Ken Livingston, if the Democrats keep this up, there's going to be a civil war, Republicans against Democrats, and you're going to effing lose. Well, the fact of the matter is, David Axelrod, who was Obama's campaign manager, said pretty much the same thing, Ken. So this is a bipartisan concern. And quite honestly, no one should hope for that outcome, because in a world where China is seeking hegemony, and America at war with itself is exactly what China would love to have happen, because it's a guarantee that they become the dominant power in the 21st century and America becomes a footnote in history, because they will not allow us to survive as a world power if they become the largest country in the world, if they become dominant. So we shouldn't hope for that. But the fact of the matter is, that's the net effect. That's a real concern. It's a concern shared by David Axelrod, of all people. Let's see. We got Bob Dinius. They want us to rebel so they can bring all the illegals into UN. So all that's missing is uniforms. They're planning all along. Bob, that's one of the things that I was talking to some people about today is the fact that when you look at the demographics of people who are coming across the border, there are very few children. We always hear about children and stuff, very, very few children, very few families. A vast majority we're talking about are military-aged males. And we're seeing them come across the border at 300,000 a month in December. We've seen in the past 3 months over 1 million, the Border Patrol processing over 1 million people who've come across our border in the last 3 months alone. We're seeing over 1 million a year of people coming across who the Border Patrol can see but doesn't process, the unaccounted for people, the gotaways. We have, at the end of the Trump administration, it was estimated there were about 22 million illegals in the country. There are more than 8 million that have come in that the Border Patrol have encountered since Biden became president. Now, I'm not that great at math, but 8 plus 22 seems to be about 30. So you think if there's 30 million illegals in the country right now, there's only 339 million, 335 million to 339 million total in the United States. That's about 8%, 9% of our entire population are here people illegally. Something to think about as we look at the border invasion, and it's why we're going to spend some time tomorrow talking about what's going on the border invasion and what people are trying to do about it, and why Speaker Johnson has made this an issue that they've planted his flag on it. Said we have to deal with this issue in a real way and secure our border. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. I thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you'll share this. And if you haven't subscribed to our broadcast, please subscribe. And with that, this is Rick Manning signing off. Thank you for tuning in, and please share.